Good evening, everybody. My name is Talson, and tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about prison. We're going to be talking about the hardships that people in prison face. And tonight, with me to actually talk about the hardships of prison life is our senior prison correspondent, the notorious DLC. DLC, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here, Talson.
All right. So, tell us a little bit about, the hardships of being in prison.
Well, Talson, you would think that prison is a cakewalk, considering that 89% of all adult males in their lifetime will go to prison for several years at a time.
89%? Wow.
89%. That's correct. That's correct. In fact, both you and I will go to prison, likely within the year, according to statistics. So,
interesting. Okay, so those statistics. So that means that only 11% of people will actually not go to prison.
That's correct. 11% of people will not go to prison, and the only reason they don't go to prison is because they typically go to county jail, which is kind of a smaller version of the prison system.
I find that hard.
But they're only in for, say, 6 to 8 months at a time before released on supervision into the community.
That's highly interesting there. So you're saying that basically everyone will be in prison at some point or time.
For reasons
precisely. Everyone that you know or have ever met or will meet will likely go to jail.
Okay, is there any reason why these people would go to jail, or is it just
various reasons? Jaywalking.
People go to prison for jaywalking.
Yeah, in some of the stricter communities, El Paso,
I find that
basically all of Louisiana, you can be incarcerated for jaywalking.
I'm pretty sure all of Louisiana is actually just one big prison. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, Belle Reve prison. Mm-hmm. They're actually, there are several high value criminals that happen to reside there. Killer Croc, Harley Quinn. I don't know if you've heard of her, Harleen Quinzel.
I think I have heard of her. I think she's been mentioned a few times.
That's true. Murder count just astronomical.
Yeah, she's got a boyfriend, right? Yeah, I think I've heard about that in like the Hollywood News or something.
Some kind of clown, bozo, something.
Yeah.
Buttons the clown. Pagliacci.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So,
Talson, this is no laughing matter. Okay.
Oh,
listen, 89%. 89%, Talson. Prison is a harsh life, okay? On the first day there, they give you one pair of socks. I don't know if you know this. It's really important, but they give you one pair. That's correct, one pair of socks, and if you do need to make any prison wine, you will have to sacrifice one of those socks in order to ferment the various fruit that they give you at dinner. That is correct.
Can't you just make the wine and then you reuse the sock?
You can, but wine sock never really kind of goes away. It's sort of like a perpetual mushiness. It's never quite dry enough.
It's kind of squishy. Yeah.
It's usually due to the fermentation process, which often takes place in a toilet. Sometimes after the toilet has already been used. That is correct.
Well, they are allowed to flush the toilet, right? I mean, we're not.
Oh no, Talson. Listen, with 89% of the adult population in prison, it's just not going to be. It's not going to be possible. It's just an astronomical tax on the sewer system.
So you're saying that basically people are not able to flush a toilet
for reasons
That's correct.
Prison.
Too disturbing.
That's correct. It's it's not even really a toilet. It's more of a bucket situation. Mm-hmm. There's several buckets and a seashell. Just one.
Just one?
Just one. Yeah.
Okay.
Just one seashell. And that's just to clean the dried matter from your body, the fecus.
The fecus. Yeah.
Yep.
Not the feces, but the fecus.
Yes, that's what it's called in prison.
Oh, that's a prison term.
Mm-hmm.
Is it any relation to the ficus?
Yes, actually, it's often because ficus is used in many prison creations as far as breakfast meals go.
I've heard that they sometimes craft shivs out of ficuses.
It's true. The little known fact: the roots of the ficus are basically sharp as knives. So they don't even really have to do a lot of work with them.
Really?
They just they just pull them right out of the ground and just pop, and then just stab, and they just go to town.
It's
fact,
amazing that they even let ficuses in the prison system.
True. You would think they wouldn't, but they are incredibly cheap to maintain.
The dangers of potted plants.
True. That's true. It's almost unreal. It's almost unreal. In fact, of the 89% of the adult population that will go to prison, 79% of that 89, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 158% of people, will be stabbed by a ficus during their time in prison.
So wait a minute. What was the percentage of people that are stabbed by ficuses?
157-ish, approximately.
So
percent.
people will actually get stabbed with ficuses. More people will get stabbed with ficuses than go into the prison. So you get stabbed more than once.
That's correct. Usually to gain access to the ficus from prison staff, they want to prove that you understand the dangers of ficus handling, and often have to force you to stab yourself in front of oftentimes visiting family members, young children. The kitchen staff in particular enjoys it quite a bit. And that's just about everywhere. It's actually in the hiring manual for the kitchen staff, is that you must enjoy people getting stabbed by common household plants. That's correct.
That is absolutely fascinating. I never knew that before.
That's yep.
Wow, this has been very educational.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I mean that's just at the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I could go on for days simply about various breakfast foods. As I mentioned before, I know I mentioned ficus, but the breakfast food is really the pinnacle of prison meal consumption during the day. They actually have breakfast more than once, usually up to 4 to 5 times a day. Prisoners will eat breakfast foods. That's correct.
So you're saying that up to 4 to 5 times a day, prisoners actually eat, but all they eat is all they eat is breakfast food?
Yes, usually the first breakfast they refer to as fun time, and that is you'll get several Fruit Loops, not often a full bowl, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 10. 10 Fruit Loops. Yeah,
just
10
Fruit Loops.
And that's it. It's actually just not even in a bowl. They just dump them into your hand, and it's actually often throughout the prisons that I've been to, throughout the United States and Guam, those Fruit Loops, it's actually considered unlucky if you get an odd number of Fruit Loops, and often somebody who gets an odd number of Fruit Loops tends to get jumped in the line, and again, part of that ficus stabbing routine. It can get pretty bloody at fun time breakfast.
At fun time breakfast, okay.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's trademarked. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say it. I'm probably going to get a call from my lawyer, but.
So you're saying that fun time breakfast is actually trademarked?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, fun time breakfast owned by the National Prison System, NPS. Not to be confused with NPR.
Right, which is the National Public Radio. And this
no, actually, it was purchased by the prisons as well. It's National Prison Radio now. I don't know if you.
Oh,
it just happened.
I was not aware of that. That is
maybe 10 minutes ago, Talson. It's breaking news. Maybe 10.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now, tell me a little bit about the prison life. I mean, the inmates themselves. Tell us a little bit about their experience in the standard justice system that we have nowadays.
Well, it's all a kangaroo court. I don't know if you know. It's all kangaroo court nowadays. Whereas most of the prisoners, most of the 89% of adults that will go to prison in their lifetime
are in Australia.
You would think with kangaroos, but no. Actually, the juror system has been replaced with marsupials. Simply because marsupials cannot be swayed between what is right and what is wrong. They don't live in a gray area, unlike humanity. You see, now, when you go normally as a juror, go into a jury system and work on a trial, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person has committed a crime. The kangaroos often know right away, just by looking at a person, whether or not they're guilty. So truly 3, maybe 4 kangaroos at a time replacing the jury system actually saves the United States government quite a bit of money.
So how do they when they say, or how do they come to a verdict? How do the kangaroos come to the verdict themselves?
Well, usually it's kind of an offshoot of the applause system, where when you go to some sort of contest or American Idol auditions, and people just applaud loudly for the one that they like the most. At least I believe that's how these things work.
So what happens if they applaud loudly? The kangaroo kicks them, or?
No, actually, just the kangaroos, they just jump up and down. So there's not really applause at all in the courtroom. In fact, it's often commonplace to be incredibly quiet during the proceedings because you don't want to miss any of the legal circumstances. But the kangaroos will jump up and down, and often, if they jump up and down more frequently enough, they will consider that person to be guilty as charged.
This is absolutely fascinating. I had no idea that this kind of thing was going on.
Yeah, it's almost a travesty if you really want to think about it. I personally don't think that marsupials have a place in our legal justice system, but experts disagree, and I think that's part of what makes America great, is the fact that we can have marsupials basically leading our entire justice system and not blink an eye at it. So
the entire justice system. So
the
you're
entire
saying that judges have basically been replaced with kangaroos.
For the most part, yes.
Or I'm sorry, is that offensive? Should I call them marsupials, or are they okay with the term kangaroos?
They often prefer marsupials, marsupial Americans.
Marsupial Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
That's very important.
So take me through a day in the life of. We've covered food. We've covered the justice system. Take me through a day in the life of your average prisoner.
Okay, well, your average prisoner, for the most part, and again, we'll not name any sort of names or any sort of prison locations, but let's say, for example, Indiana. Your common prisoner in Indiana wakes up somewhere in the neighborhood of 3:30 a.m. For fun time breakfast. So you usually kind of catch them off guard. They don't actually, turn on all the lights all at once. Mostly, it's just people yelling up and down the halls to wake up because it's fun time. So they'll be woken up, the lights will come on, and they'll be ushered into the eating area, sometimes without being able to change clothes at all from the previous night's festivities. So they will go to breakfast, fun time breakfast. Hopefully there won't be any more than 2, maybe 3 stabbings. And then after that, they go to what they're calling prison recess. That's the time spent out in the yard. To give the American prisoner a sort of freedom that they haven't had in a period of time. Most of the weightlifting exercise equipment has actually been replaced with adult-sized playground equipment in most of the prisons, except for the swings. They actually can't have swings because obviously the chains. It's a choking hazard. So yeah, they do jungle gym, monkey bars. Type situation, and often prisoners, you'll see 3, maybe 4, even 5 prisoners just lined up in a row doing pull-ups on that bar, and they'll be out there.
So it's a monkey bar, not monkey bars. That's
correct. It's just one long bar that stretches the length of the prison yard. So and that's again a cost-saving measure. One bar is one monkey bar is obviously cheaper than 10 monkey bars per se.
I would imagine so.
That's correct. So fun time breakfast usually over in about a half an hour. So around 4 o'clock in the morning, they're allowed outside, and it's all weather. It's day in, day out. It's hot, cold, rainy. They go outside. It's actually required that everyone go outside into the yard, and they'll again do various activities. Sometimes lasting an hour, sometimes lasting 2-3 hours, just depending on the guard rotation and the weather of the day, and how many stabbings there were at Fun Time Breakfast.
So do they rate the stabbings, or I mean, is it just depending on how many stabbings? How many stabbings during Fun Time Breakfast is, say, average?
Average 2 to 3 on average, and then if they can't reach the 2 to 3 there at Fun Time Breakfast, then usually they'll get a little bit longer outside to enjoy themselves.
To meet for stabbings in Fun Time Breakfast.
Well, it's a prisoner-based quota. I mean, again, this is about the prisoner's life at this point. And the prisoners themselves set that sort of quota simply because they're not terribly fond of the idea of waking up at 3:30 in the morning at a surprise to eat 10 Fruit Loops. Anyways,
you mentioned that everybody gets 10 Fruit Loops.
10.
You would think that they would use this as some sort of currency system.
They really don't. I think everybody's just grateful for the fact that they can have Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops is the breakfast cereal of champions. And oftentimes, if you want to avoid being...
Actually, DLC, I think you're confusing that with Wheaties.
I don't think that's correct. I have it on a really good source within the prison food system that they consider Fruit Loops to be the breakfast of champions, especially champions in the prison system, the warden, and so on.
Now, you mentioned the warden. How is the life for people that work inside the prison, like the security guards, the warden, the janitors?
Well, yeah, of course. So after, and this actually kind of plays in. I'm glad you mentioned that. So after Fun Time Breakfast, after the outside monkey bar experience, which again I think they're looking into a trademark on that too. They'll come back inside, and then the fighting will begin. By fighting, yeah, that's correct. So the fighting actually is part of just this entire ranking system within the prison. It's almost like Hunger Games, if you've ever seen Hunger Games, where so. Sometimes
the hit movie, yeah, okay,
that's correct. So sometimes 50 or 60 people will be in the Hunger Games, and they're all vying for one job, and that's the warden. And so what they do is they actually fight in a series of battles, progressing in difficulty towards the top of the rung, where they have to fight the warden, who often dresses in a ceremonial skull mask. They actually fight him at the end, and they actually get to be the warden for the day.
So you're saying that people actually participate in physical altercations to determine who is the superior person, and that person gets to be the warden.
That's correct. That's correct.
Are inmates allowed to participate in this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Actually, the inmates are encouraged, preferably if they have some experience in martial arts. If they happen to have more than 2 arms, sometimes up to 3 or 4. If they happen to have any Hollywood experience, preferably with wearing sunglasses and having their name written on their pants.
Like that guy, yeah, that did the kicks.
Yes. Yes, Lance Armstrong, I think.
I believe you're correct.
That's correct. So they'll compete in really this tournament, if you will, throughout the day, usually for 5 to 6 hours at a time, whilst others watch, and basically pray that there aren't any more fatalities during the day. They usually prefer matches to end in some sort of friendship, or indeed where one opponent feels more like a baby than a full-grown person.
This combat that you're talking about sounds very, very violent and possibly fatal.
It is often. It can indeed be a mortal combat situation. I'm sorry, fatal combat situation.
All right, I'm hearing right now that is acceptable. We can use fatal combat. Yes,
That's correct.
Let's see. So now we've talked about the prisoners. We've talked about the prison system itself, and I believe you said 89% of all people. Now, does that include men and women, or is there a slightly skewed aspect of that?
Well, the 89% does include men and women. It is of the 89% of men and women, 47% of those are women, and the other 56% are male.
You know what? I'm going to run with that.
It's truly disheartening to think that our system is comprised of so many people in the prison system. In fact, I'm more than likely risking my freedom in order to bring you this tale of the actual prison system.
Well, you are reporting from the prison system itself, so it stands to reason that by being there just in that proximity, you might actually be going to prison today.
That is very well possible. I believe that when the officer picked me up for the interview, he did mention something under his breath about locking me up. And I believe there may or may not have been a ficus-related transaction to occur before that scenario. That's correct.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add to this report? Because you've given us a lot of information here.
I think it's important to note, again, we've only talked about the one breakfast. That was Fun Time Breakfast. Then they have second breakfast after the tournament. And it's actually second, third, and fourth breakfast actually go back to back to back, in which you are served 3 full prison meals and are required to eat all 3 of them. It's sort of a nutritional system. They realize that the energy expended during fatal combat is often extreme. So they'll feed on various breakfast cereals, orangutans.
Wait, orangutans?
Yeah, it's actually a rather cost-effective measure. Many prisons today will actually raise larger primates in order to consume on site.
And where exactly do they raise these orangutans? I mean, is there a spot in the prison that they? Yes, tell me more, please.
That's a very good question. It's often a prisoner exchange type program. For example, often in prisons, prisoners may be instructed to raise and care for a service animal as part of their prison experience. So in today's American prison, often the orangutans will move in with the prisoners. Sort of a Dunstan checks in type scenario, where they'll move in together, they'll become fast friends, and then oftentimes they're required to sacrifice that friend for the day's meal. It is rather unfortunate in a heartbreaking scenario, especially after 2 to 3 hours of hijinks have played out with the orangutan.
That sounds absolutely horrible, and
It is.
I am really disheartened to hear about such a travesty.
It is. However, they have increased the orangutan population by 3 to 4-fold. Often, the orangutans will refuse to be eaten. Some have expressed verbal discontent with the eating process, and those that protest loudest are heard first, as you know. So those orangutans will often be granted clemency.
So the orangutans are actually, you would say that their sentence has been stayed?
Yes. Well, they check in and sometimes they check out. such as the Dunstan checks in scenario, as I mentioned before.
Do they get to wear funny hats?
No, Towson. I mean, it's a prison. A hat is a choking hazard, especially for orangutans who have a taste for hats and human flesh. So they often are not allowed to bite anything other than the food provided to them.
Okay. Wow, this is... Now, what about reform? I mean, our prison systems are hailed as being great at reforming and, transferring life skills to people. I mean, what kind of... what have you learned, or what have you uncovered about the reform process?
Well, the reform process is a slow one. However, just recently, within the past few months, we've had kind of an uproar. A warden from the West by the name of Martin Luther Vandross actually nailed 95 penal codes to the door of the prison that he was in charge of. And that prison itself then splintered into two smaller prisons, one with a more strict, regal sense of law and order, and the other with a more loosey-goosey sort of punishment system.
I believe that one was actually run by his brother, Luther Vandross.
Well, it's Towson. He doesn't go by that. It's usually just Luke Vandross, just because they're so similar to each other, Martin Luther Vandross and Luther Vandross. But yes, Luke Vandross actually helmed the smaller protesting prison.
Smaller but equal.
It was indeed smaller but equal. That is correct. So we're seeing those sort of protests pop up all over the place, across the country. Seeing all sorts of penal codes nailed to all sorts of doors. I expect big things to come out of our prison system here soon, namely because the tallest prisoners will be released first in terms of priority.
So, wait. The tallest prisoner will be released first? Is
That's
it the
correct.
person who's served their sentence, or possibly, I don't know, committed a less offensive crime?
Well, that certainly stands to reason, but in today's kangaroo courts, often the taller prisoners are convicted first, simply because the kangaroos are frightened of their appearance. So they will they'll typically release those taller prisoners earlier on. Hence, why I said big things are coming out of our prison system as soon. Very soon.
You actually meant the big people are getting out of prison soon.
That's correct. It's a play on words.
I caught on to that. Yes.
Turn of phrase.
I don't think it's. I think it's more of a play on words there. No, not a turn of phrase.
Sure.
Yeah.
A turn on phrase? Yes, it is actually. Often people are very. We actually have a large population, a large female population, a large male population who almost fetishize the taller prisoners simply because of their commuted sentences, and it becomes quite a show in here.
All right. Well, DLC, thank you so much for your input on this tonight, sir. Because I think we can all walk away from this more educated about our prison system.
Yeah, it's if I could leave you with one final thought,
yes.
I think it's important that we understand that the penal system is no joke. Again, as I mentioned, literally everyone that you know, or have ever known, or will ever know, will go to some sort of jail at some point. It's important not to take that too lightly. Often we request that families do purchase their loved ones additional padded clothing, potentially
for the ficus strikes. Yes.
Correct. Several other pairs of socks, again because of the prison wine, which is quite a hot commodity, I might add. Actually goes very well with the Fruit Loops. So several other pairs of socks, shaving materials, but no razors, just the foam. We recommend that simply because you can fill a pillow with that, and kind of sleep on it for a brief moment of time, which gives you a little bit of respite from the hard stone of the beds. It's very important, again, that we note that prison's no joke. Okay, this is a very serious global pandemic here in America and globally. Again, the prisons that I've been to here in America, as well as in Guam, have often run very similarly, almost nonstop. Again, with the tournaments and the several different breakfasts, almost force fed to the prisoners. It's truly a travesty. But I think the one shining glimmer of hope that we have from today's prison system, again, is that the tallest people, again, will be freed soon. The big things will be coming out of the prison. And then also the substantial growth of the orangutan population. Despite being consumed, again, for food, these orangutans will be living happy, healthy lives once they are given a ticket away from the prison onto a public bus and provided with shelter within the community.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our senior prison correspondent, the Notorious DLC, for filling us in and educating us on this wonderful, wonderful topic.
Of course. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. And let's see. Let's switch back over and... Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and my name has been Talson, and have a wonderful evening.